What's going on, everybody? It's RoarYJ here, coming at you with a brand new video. It's the beginning of a new month. That means it's time for another tier list as per usual. And today's tier list is going to be quite interesting because we've had about a month to play with the brand new Grand Creators set, which introduced the Brave token / Adventure token archetype, whatever you want to call it, into the TCG, and that has definitely shaped deck building up a lot more than a lot of other sets can say for the last few, years even. There was a lot of speculation about what it would do to the game at first, but now that we've actually gotten to see all the things that it can actually play into, we can definitely get a better grasp upon what it actually does for the format. We've also had a few events here and there, and a few other statistics to go off of, so this is going to be a very, very fun tier list. Before we get started though, I just want to say that this is all based on personal opinion, statistics from events and other things like that, and from other YouTubers, other content creators' opinions, and on the other social media sites, and things like that. So please remember not to go out of your way to attack me or any other content creators or anybody in my or other people's comment sections, because at the end of the day, it's just a card game, and so it's super childish and stupid, and that's just not okay. I'm sorry if you can see me rubbing my shoulder throughout the video either, by the way, because I have pulled a muscle, I think, or something. It really, really hurts. It's super sore, but I'm gonna try to ignore it the best I can. I gotta get that content out, bro. Now, a lot of things have actually not changed too much from my last even few tier lists, not even just my last tier list, and so I'm gonna try not to dwell on certain decks for as long as I usually do. So keeping that in mind, let's go ahead and get right into my March 2022 tier list for the competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format. So first off, we have the Adventure engine itself. This is going to be our very first tier 1 pick, and of course, I'm not talking about pure adventure. This deck is absolutely awful if you play it on its own, but as an engine, it's kind of just dominating a lot of different decks right now. Even in the Rogue sphere, this is being played just about as much as Dragoon was, honestly, back when Dragoon was the biggest problem card. The engine is super strange in the fact that it's changed deck building just so much over the past month that it's been around. Overall, it's a very powerful engine, it's a very strange engine, it's nothing that we've really seen before in the game, but with how impactful it has been on the format already, I'm going to be putting it as the first thing in our tier 1 slot. Remember, not as the pure deck, but as the engine. Next up, we have the Scythe Lock, which is another strategy / engine more than it is an actual deck. This is also going to be going up into tier 1 because with the Adventure engine and things like that, we've had the Scythe package showing up a lot more. A lot of decks are Scythe locking right now, so if you're not prepared for Scythe locking, you should totally go ahead and get on that. But these are going to be the only two meme things that are going to go up here because, we don't have a virus or anything anymore, or Imperial Order. But these two engines are kind of just crushing everything right now, and so I'm going to be putting them up here. So next up for our actual first deck, we're going to have Phantom Knights, and Phantom Knights are going to be in the tier 1 slot, of course, because Phantom Knights, of course, as you already know, got the Adventure engine from Grand Creators, and that's really just skyrocketed the deck into whole new levels of competitive viability, right? Because the deck was really fragile to nib if given the wrong hand. And so this really just kind of invalidates nib entirely unless they have imperm as well. And it can even protect from other hand traps and make your opponent shotgun other things like Ash very early on, much like how the old Orcust engine worked, with Neospace Connector. Completely uninterrupted though, it's going to be ending off on about... if you don't go the Scythe Lock package, you get 2 pops, you get an Omni Negate, and then you get 2 Fog Blades. If you go for the Scythe Lock package, you have the DPE with the Scythe Lock, which is already kind of just an FTK. But then you also usually have a Fog Blade or 2, you got the Griffin Rider. You got so much different jank you can play in this deck, and it's really just packed full of extenders, so it's going to be really hard to hand trap unless you have a big blowout one like Lancea. With all these things and more, and the fact that Phantom Knights have taken up a quite sizable chunk of these last few regional tops, it's going to be our very first deck for the March 2022 format list. And next up we have Dinosaur, a personal favorite on the channel. I'm gonna have to keep Dinosaur in the Rogue category. However, I will be keeping it at the very top of Rogue, and here's why. So, unfortunately, I can't put it any higher because Lancea is being run in every side deck and even some main decks right now because of how powerful it is this format, and that kind of just invalidates the best plays of the deck. But Dinosaur is actually pretty good this format, specifically not just due to going second using things like Evenly Match, which, if you haven't known, completely invalidates the Adventure engine as long as you either bait out or negate the Omni Negate. The Evenly Match just kind of destroys everything, but also due to the fact of the card called Survival's End. Now, Survival's End, for those of you that don't know, I'll try to put it up on screen if I can remember, basically is a trap card that says destroy as many normal monsters on the field as possible. This includes tokens, and if you do, special summon level 4 or lower dinosaurs from your deck up to or equal to the number destroyed, but destroy them during the end phase, and while it's in your grave, you can banish it from your grave, I believe, to destroy both a dinosaur on your field and either a card on the field or a monster or something like that. One of those two things. Now, this is really, really good, this format, not just due to adventures, but also due to the fact that Sword Soul is still running around, and this basically just shuts down Sword Soul because they lose their tuner token. As well, it's free access to searching with things like OV, even getting a Misc on field if you need to get it in grave, Baby for either food or for dying during the end phase, or even Baby on the field for popping with the second effect, which I don't believe it's one effect per turn. So you can actually not only get a nuke for that, but then also get a nuke which can give you advantage by popping your Baby, but also get rid of things on your opponent's field. While it is a good card though, I don't think it's enough to bump up Dinosaur too high. It does help play through Lancea just a little bit because it gives it a bit more interruption, but that's really all I can see it doing. It can really play Token Collector though really well compared to some other decks because it actually benefits due to the Lost World stuff, but unfortunately, all in all, I don't think Dinosaur is worthy of anything higher than the top of the Rogue category. So next up, we have Alistair.deck, Invoked, Dogmatika, Shaddoll, whatever. You know, I'm going to have to put this in the tier 1 slot as well, but keep in mind this will probably be going at the bottom of the tier 1 slot because Invoked didn't see any sort of success at either of these two regionals, at least in top 8. I cannot unfortunately see top 16 or top 32. I know Dark Magician got like top 16 at one of them, which was really mind-boggling. But in terms of top 8, it didn't crack for either of the regionals that I can see, being the Side Deck Cafe and the AI Festival. Sorry about that, I had to recheck just in case. That's not to say, though, that this deck is bad. Absolutely not. This deck is absolutely still crazy, being able to be so consistent in all the different engines it can use, as well as Winda kind of invalidating like half the decks right now, if not almost all the decks. Nadir Servant 2 on the last list kinda hit it in terms of the Shaddoll package, but then you can just play a main deck Shaddoll package like I personally do, and overall I think you're still fine. So while this deck didn't see like the greatest success like some of the other decks this format, I feel like it's still a perfectly fine tier 1 deck. Next up, we have Sword Soul, and Sword Soul is a bit interesting for me because I'm gonna be honest, I only know one of the regionals top deck, and that was Sword Soul for one of them, which I believe was the AI one, I believe. Yeah, that's correct. I believe it was the AI one. That Sword Soul actually won. I don't know about the second one, and so I can't say for sure if it was them or if it was Phantom Knight or whatever. But Sword Soul, no matter where it goes in relation to Phantom Knight, I'm gonna put this back down here. No matter where it goes in relation to Phantom Knight, this deck is an absolute monster. We've been seeing people finally start to innovate other different like builds into the deck, like such as the Hulk package, which basically allows you to play through interruptions a bit more smoothly. You know, I'm trying to think of an example. Like maybe if you open like really poorly, you get your Moye impermed, right? You have an Adhara and you have a Moye on field. You can go ahead and go into a Hulk, get your Despot 001 and start going into Auroradon combos, which basically lets you play through interruption a bit better than the deck could before, especially because it was a bit susceptible to hand traps if you didn't open like a full crazy Tenyi package. They did also just get Qixing Longwan in Battles of Chaos, which I totally forgot to mention in the very beginning. That did help shape the format just a little bit more. And so I believe, I don't know, because the Scythe is powerful and all, but I personally think that Sword Soul is still, you know, the best deck of the format. I think I put Phantom Knight in the last one, but I do think that Sword Soul is slightly better, mainly just due to the fact that it's a bit more simple, right? Phantom Knights can be a bit complex, and therefore you can flop a little bit, and the builds are really sporadic, and you know, there's never really like a set theme other than, yeah, you might be able to Scythe Lock, right? But everyone's starting to prepare for the Scythe Lock like really easily. You have things like Forbidden Droplet as well, Forbidden Chalice, Imperm, things like that. And the fact that Sword Soul, out of the top few decks, probably dies the least to Lancea. It still hurts a lot because it invalidates all the Tenyi cards, as well as things like the One of Desires maybe, and your Taya. But compared to Phantom Knights that kind of just need to banish in order to survive, it really doesn't mind not being able to banish too much, as long as it opens a good hand. So I'm going to be putting Sword Soul in the top slot for tier 1 outside of our two little funny engines here, and I think it's going to stay there for quite a while considering we don't know when the next ban list is going to be. Next up, we have Altergeist, and I'm going to put Altergeist under Dinosaur in the Rogue category. Pukori didn't really do all the things that we expected it to. Like I said in my last tier list, people just can't decide on the right ratio because it can just either clog or you just don't see it at all. And then by the late game, it kind of just doesn't help very much. You kind of want to open it, but you don't want to open multiples, right? Not to mention that the last ban list did remove one of their powerhouse cards in the form of Imperial Order, and so I really don't feel like the deck is very good when you could just play like any other control deck, and so I'm going to be putting Altergeist below Dinosaur for now. Next up, we have Madolche, and I know I've been generous in putting Madolche in the tier 2 slot, but I think I'm going to put it above Altergeist, but below Dinosaur right now. It hasn't really done very much since that one regional. I think they did one, like, I think it did okay in a regional after the very first regional coming back in the EU, but I really don't think it's been doing too much. Also, the fact that the Small World package, yeah, while it's good, it doesn't really add too much other than consistency, which, yeah, now that the deck's more consistent, that's great, especially considering that you could build a house with it before. Not as much as Monarch, but the deck is still incredibly fragile, especially with things like Nibiru, which is really prevalent right now, and Lancea running around again. It kind of invalidates like half the things in the deck, and by half I mean Hoot Cake, which is very, very important. As well, while the back row build I do think is a bit better than the regular build, I don't think it's too crazy when you compare it to something like Eldlich, which we'll get to in a minute, as you can see. So I'm going to be putting Madolche in the upper part of Rogue for now. If we see it do some more, I'll probably change my tune a bit and bump it back up to tier 2, but for now, we're just not seeing the results. Now, next up, we have Drytron, and I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe Drytron hit top 16 or top 32 in one or both of the regionals, and so that's really, really cool. And with the banning of Eva, the deck has had to change playstyles, right? So they started playing the Megalith build, which was always running around, but was never really the dominant build. Well, the Megalith build is really good, alright? Not only can you do some funky Hulk stuff if you really feel like it, but also the fact that popping up to 5 with Bethor on the opponent's turn is kind of just ridiculous, especially considering that it can't get, like, Dark Ruler or something, right? They have to hit something like a Chalice on it. Or they have to do like a droplet after playing through all your other things, which you can have like, you know, a DPE or a Dragoon. You can Scythe block with the deck. You can have like IP with a Unicorn. All sorts of things like that. The deck overall is really, really fun now. It's a lot more fun than sitting on Herald for like 7 Negates Pass. And so, for those reasons, I'm going to be putting it as the very first deck in our tier 1.5 slot. I'm glad that Drytron's actually seeing a more fun build now, because I always thought the deck and the premise was really cool, kind of just better incantations, but with a different cost. And so it's really nice to see it in tier 1.5 in the upper parts again. Next up, we have Eldlich, and I'm going to be putting Eldlich above Drytron in tier 1.5. Now, you'll see a lot of people saying, oh, Eldlich is kind of bad, right? You know, it can't really recover from board wipes, which is total bullshit, by the way. The entire point of their deck is recovering from losing their things on field. You know, that back row hate kind of murders them, and it can kind of brick at times in terms of their back row, but 3 skill drain. Moving on. No, I'm kidding. Basically, Eldlich is a really, really good control deck. I would argue it's the best back row deck to currently play, and I know it's going to be a bit of a running theme throughout this video, and while it's not the most crazy thing ever, it is very relevant. With 3 skill drain, this deck is kind of a monster because, you know, skill drain kind of invalidates a lot of different decks, especially if they don't play native back row removal, because you can't even, like, negate the skill drain with Imperm in the column because everything's already negated. Also, even if they were to be really, really bad shape, if their back row got nuked, Lord of the Heavenly Prison kind of just negates that entirely, as well as gives you resources for the next turn, such as Curse Eldland if you really need it, or any of your other, you know, Eldlixirs and stuff that you can use on your follow-up turn. The deck is basically back row control while punching with very big bodies, which is really surprisingly viable. And so I'm going to be putting it as the top deck of our tier 1.5 for now. We might get to something else later on in the row, but it's going to be claiming a spot right above Drytron. So next up is something I decided to add. So this hasn't been in a tier list of mine for either forever or like at all. And we have Orcust. So I was labbing a bit last night, today, a few weeks ago and everything, and I have a few videos up on my channel, or at least one, about Orcust being Orcust. And while I do think the deck really struggles in terms of consistency, especially without Harpor or Mermaid, I feel like the deck is still perfectly fine. You can actually replicate your entire Mermaid combo if you dedicate a little bit more resources to it, and even without that combo, you can actually dedicate to a slightly smaller combo. But overall, the deck, I think, is perfectly fine and worthy of a tier 2 slot. Whether you play the scrap build that is a lot more explosive and sits on a window and stuff, but a bit more fragile to hand traps, or if you play the Phantom Knight build, which is my preferred one of choice after I started gimmicking around with it, where, you know, you can end off on like 2 Fog Blades, Galatea, Babel, a bunch of things engrave, IP, things like that. The deck is super fun. It can be really explosive if given the right hands. However, that's really the problem keeping it in tier 2 is the hands. I feel like even with 3 copies of Harp, the deck would still be in a really bad situation in terms of drawing well because, well, they draw bad. Having to play things like World Wand and Nightmare and all sorts of things like that, and having cards that are completely dead if they're not in the graveyard is really, really painful. And I'm terribly sorry, by the way, I meant to put this in Rogue. So while I don't think the deck is higher or worthy of a tier than a Rogue slot, right? I feel like it's still perfectly feasible in what it can do. Hopefully, you know, next ban list will finally get Heart back, or, you know, maybe we could spice things up and bring back Mermaid. That'd be really funny. But for now, I feel like the deck is fine. It really gets really good follow-up, which is kind of what every deck kind of wants right now. And so overall, I think that it's a really solid deck that people are sleeping on. So next up, we have Sky Striker, and I'm going to be putting Sky Striker between Drytron and Eldlich in our tier 1.5 category. So Imperial Order is gone, of course. Sky Striker is going to be doing a lot better just from that, especially because not a lot of people are really playing Anti-Spell now, because, you know, those basically serve as 2 extra copies of IO, but on its own, it's really not very much, especially with Forbidden Droplet running around. Because of this, Sky Striker is actually doing really well, and it will continue to do very well, mainly just because, A, it can Scythe Lock if it really chooses to, B, it can just run DPE in general, and C, it's just very recursive overall. And while it didn't get anything back off the list, the banning of Imperial Order, I believe, is enough to justify keeping it in the 1.5 category, even if it didn't get any top 8 slots at either regional. So next up, we have Tri-Brigade, and once again, I'm going to be putting Tri-Brigade in tier 1.5. I'll put it at the upper parts of tier 1.5, but hear me out. Out of both regionals, out of 16 top slots, right, top 8 for one, top 8 for the other, Tri-Brigade got 1. And believe it or not, it was the Melfi variant. Yeah. Do I think Tri-Brigade is bad right now? God, no, absolutely not. Tri-Brigade is ridiculous. Compared to the other high decks, though, it's really not doing too much. If you want to see a more modern version of Bird Up, by the way, after the last ban list and after Battles of Chaos and everything like that, I will be plugging one up in the corner shamelessly. You should totally go check it out. I have some updated combos and stuff, and basically what the Bird Up deck can do after the last ban list hits. But overall, I feel like the Tri-Brigade variants, even with Lunalights being freed fully, basically, except for, you know, 2 more copies of Tiger, I feel like it's just not doing enough right now. Do I think Tri-Brigade will keep its place in the meta at least at all? Of course. Do I think it's going to fall off? Absolutely not. Do I think it's not as good as it once was? Absolutely. And so for all those reasons and more, I'm going to be keeping Tri-Brigade in the 1.5 category for now. Feel free to prove me wrong in the comments if you so choose. But as a Tri-Brigade player myself, I don't feel like it's currently all that it was cracked up to be. So next up, we have Virtual World. And interestingly enough, I'm going to be putting Virtual World as our final tier 1 deck, or it should be our final, looking at all of this. Yep. I'm going to be putting it as our final tier 1 deck. Virtual World is kind of fire right now. Sure, you lost 2 copies or at least 1 copy of Desires if you know you're playing the good ratio of 2 Desires. However, you got 3 copies of Emergency Teleport, which is amazing. Because Desires, yeah, it could draw you 2 cards, but what if those 2 cards were like Chu-Chi Desires, or Chu-Chi Qinglong, Chu-Chi Lili, right? And you have no normal summon, or you have no back row, right, that you can use for your things in hand. Well, E-Tele is basically just a free body on board that allows you to get your things like Lulu, Lili, Gigi, all that stuff sort of active. And that basically helps your bricking problem get solved a little bit. Sure, it's only 1 extra copy of E-Tele, but that 1 extra copy is throwing around a lot of weight. As well, things like Lancea kind of do hurt the deck a little bit, especially if they do open the Desires and they need it, if they're still playing the one of. But it really doesn't hurt it as much as some of the other decks. Probably, you know, actually I do think that it doesn't get hurt as bad as Sword Soul does, right? But I feel like it's just not as good as Sword Soul, right? So that's kind of irrelevant. But even if you choose not to play the Desires build, you can play a bunch of different engines, right? Because the Brave Token engine is really, really good in Virtual World. It can play it because it doesn't have anything that works on normal summon, right? Or even on summon except for the extra deck. You can play the very interesting build that just topped that involved playing a Necro World Banshee, a Doom King Ballardrock, and a Zombie World, where you use Beatrice to dump Necro World and Ballardrock, one on your turn, one on your opponent's turn, getting not only the Zombie World as a floodgate, but also getting Ballardrock as a Banish and a Negate, if I recall correctly, which is really, really solid, especially considering how big of a body he is. Or you can just kind of be a basic bitch right now and play the Scythe lock that everybody else is playing, because you can make Beatrice, dump the Scythe, and then revive it during the next turn. The deck is super flexible, and even with 1 Desires, having the 3rd E-Telly makes it a lot more consistent and a lot less bricky in terms of being able to get things on board for their high levels. And so overall, I feel like Virtual World is super, super good, and I would totally start playing it if I were you. And if you're looking for a relatively budget, really good deck right now, I feel like even though it's a bit complex, Virtual World is the one for you. So next up we have Prank Kids, and very, very interestingly enough, Prank Kids got 4 out of 16 top slots at both regionals, which I find kind of crazy. That's the same amount as Phantom Knight, and granted, I don't think it won either of them. I know it didn't win the one where it had 3 tops. I definitely don't think it won the one where it had 1 top. But the fact that it even top period is really, really good. And the thing is, Skill Drain is at 3, and the Adventure Token engine exists. Of course, the deck doesn't have any effects on normal summon, it's after the things are sent to grave, and so the Adventure Token fits right in, especially considering just how fragile the deck is to a single interruption like Nib or Ash. You also have the fact that even with the Adventure engine, you still have a little bit of room for flexibility in terms of hand traps, especially if you cut down on things like one player did with 1 copy of Roxy's, which I found interesting. And then you can actually natively play Skill Drain in the deck because it really doesn't affect your things. Keep in mind that Skill Drain works differently than things like Impermanent Effect Veiler, where things that tribute for cost under Skill Drain will actually still resolve, because it only negates their effects while they're on the field. So for example, Battle Butler will actually still work, and be able to nuke your things, or nuke your opponent's things, I'm sorry, while you control it, or your opponent controls a Skill Drain. Same with your things like Dodo, Bow Wow, and things like that. They even also have access to things like There Can Be Only One, which is another stupid powerful floodgate that invalidates a lot of decks currently. And so while I don't think it's better than Tri-Brigade, I will put it actually just under it. Above Eldlich, but under Tri-Brigade as a whole. The deck is doing really, really good, as to be expected with all the things that came off the list and that came out in Battles of Chaos and Grand Creators. And considering it got a quarter out of the total 16 slots at both regionals, I think it deserves its current spot on this list. Next up we have Hero, and as per usual, it is the most expensive Nib token you'll ever make. They did get an extra copy of A Hero Lives, so I will put them above all these 3 right here, because A Hero Lives does actually help them get access to things like Stratos really easily. But overall, the deck is still a bit lackluster, right? Especially because it did lose a copy of Fusion Destiny, I guess. So that does kind of hurt Hero players, at least in the slightest, because I'm pretty sure they played 3. But overall, it's still Plasma, Dark Law, DPE, Turbo, and so I feel like the deck is fine. It just doesn't really have any protection from big interruption like Nibiru or Evenly. Until then, it's going to be stuck down here for a long, long time. Finally, we have a tier 2 deck. This is Adamancipator, a deck that I constantly tell you guys that it's being slept on so hard. Considering all the things that this deck can do and how explosive it can be if your RNG is in your favor, which it usually is, I feel like it's absolutely absurd. Granted, unless you have the Guardian up, or if you don't use the Guardian right for material or something, you can get nibbed pretty hard. But overall, I feel like Adamancipator is really silly, because even something as simple as normal summoning Ash Blossom with Parallel Exceed in hand can get you like 8 disruptions. Actually, I think it's more along the line of like 5 or 6, but still, that's crazy. Things like Dragite can protect it from evenly matched, and you have the Quackimire Guardians that do protect it from things like Nib, but then also can stay at the end phase. It has native things like Appaloosa for 3 or even 4, Naturia Beast, which is basically Imperial Order, but on crack, and of course, as per usual, like I like to mention, this deck can Scythe Lock. Overall, I feel like you should totally check out exactly what the deck can do, because I don't think it's dead at all. Next up, we have Adagnister, and this is once again, you know, the most expensive Nib token, or actually, the least expensive Nib token you'll probably ever make. I'm going to be putting it just above Madolche, because if it can get to the towers, some decks can have a problem outing that, especially if it's at anywhere from 4 to 6k. But the problem is getting to the towers, considering that a single hit to your Dark Templar is kind of just game, or even a hit to the Dark Infant if they don't open the field spell. Salamangreat is going to be chilling as another tier 2 deck. I'm going to be putting it at the very low part of tier 2, mainly just because I kind of want another deck in tier 2 and not in Rogue. But Salamangreat getting an extra copy of Circle was really nice on the last list, helping the deck's consistency just a little bit, which is something it thrived at. Not to mention that the deck has immediate access to things like access code or even just the transcode update jammer OTK. And they also have insane recovery and follow-up because they can just repeat their turn just about every single turn. Things like Jack Jaguar putting things back, Falco allowing you to add things and special itself, Spinny specialing from hand, all sorts of different things allow the deck to basically just be completely free. I don't think it's that crazy in what it does though, however, unless you like hard open one of the trap cards, you're not going to be ending off on more than like Aurora or a Rage and then like Field Spell Link Monster. It does have access to things like Baguska though with Parallel Exceed if it really wants to, which doesn't affect their links at all. So I feel like the deck is perfectly suitable, but it's definitely not deserving of more than anything like than tier 2. So next up we have Dragon Link, which I'm going to be putting at the top of tier 2. Now Dragon Link actually did really well at the regionals, managing to steal a top slot in the Side Deck Gaming Cafe one, and shocker, it plays Adventurer Token. Or maybe not that build, I actually don't know, but I'm assuming it does because everywhere is posting about Adventurer Token Dragon Link. I actually experienced going against the deck myself at my first locals after the new ban list, and the deck is kinda just silly. While it doesn't end off on much, the Adventurer Token engine allows it to have a bit more disruption and a bit more follow-up in terms of things like, you know, getting the Griffin Rider, getting the Draco back, being able to bounce things. It's really, really nice overall. It also helps stop things like Nib, even more so than the deck could before, because before, it could kind of play through Nib with, like, the Brotar stuff. It could kind of do at least something. But at least the deck is ending off on more than just, like, you know, Sphere's Savage Pass at most. While I do think the deck still suffers from follow-up overall, I do think the Adventure Token package helps just a little bit for the deck, and so it's going to be going up in tier 2 because of the success it has been seeing. Next up, we have the Bees, and they're going to be going down here. Lancea really hurts this deck. Nibiru really hurts this deck. Any sort of interruption really at all really hurts this deck. We did get Dragon Bite, I believe it's his name, in Battles of Chaos, which is a tuner that allows the deck access to things like Savage Dragon, which is really, really cool. However, I don't really think it's... You know, actually, I'll put it... Nah, it hasn't really been seeing, like, any success. I was gonna put it above Salamangreat, but nah. Overall, the deck is not in a very good spot. I'll keep it in tier 2 because I want to be really nice, because I can still do some sort of things with the Dragon Bite. However, I do feel like compared to some of the other decks, it's just not doing that great. Next up, we have Traptrix, which is kind of a personal favorite of mine, and I don't know whether to put this in tier 2 or Rogue, because honestly, the deck having access to Imperial Order for literally free was kind of the main purpose of having it in tier 2 at first. However, with the loss of Imperial Order, Lord of the Heavenly Prison, while it's still insanely good in the deck, has been nerfed just slightly. I think, though, that I am still going to put it at the bottom of tier 2, because, yeah, it can't really do anything with IO anymore. However, it still has crazy access to other different floodgates. Technically, you could play There Can Be Only One if you would like, if you want to use both Viscera as your plant and then like start summoning some insects and stuff. But mainly you can also use things like Skill Drain, because keep in mind, as long as they were already on the field before it was activated, your Sarah, your Ecclesia, all of them, all your extra deck ones, will be unaffected by the Skill Drain. The deck does suffer heavily from being hit by back removal, but things like Judgment and Lord of the Heavenly Prison definitely help the deck out a lot in that regard, and Gravedigger's Trap Hole is still an incredibly powerful card, especially in a format where a lot of things are activating in hand, grave, or banished. I think it's a really fun control back row stun strategy, so if you're looking to play a deck that is all of those things, and relatively simple to play, but also really just fun overall, then you should totally check out Traptrix. I really hope Sarah goes down in price soon. Next up, we have Evil Twin. I'm going to be putting Evil Twin above Traptrix. I'll put it below Bees for now, but if I recall correctly, Evil Twin, Live Twin, whatever you want to call it, did top an event. It wasn't a regional, I don't believe, unless we had one before these last two on this past weekend. It did top an event with like 1 or 2 slots or something like that, and so I am proud of it in that regard. Maybe it was like the last YCS or whatever that we had, so I am proud of it in that regard. However, the deck overall isn't really doing anything too crazy. Also, with reprints not on the horizon for the original extra deck girls, the deck is really not beginner friendly and like how I thought it would be, strictly just because of budget reasons. However, it is a very simple but also high ceiling deck that you can play with a bunch of different disruptions, and so I think that overall it's really fine. And then finally we have Earth Machine. Fuck you. Except that's actually not the last thing, and I totally forgot to add these 2 things to the list, and you'll hear me mention that later on, at least for Sidra, but I'm so angry that I forgot to put Flunder. Basically, Sydra's gonna go in Rogue. I want to put it down very, very low. Sydra's kind of mid, honestly. There's still no machine decks or anything running around, so it really doesn't do too much. But I really wanted to talk about Floowandereeze. I am so sorry. Flunder is in such a great spot right now. Not only does it have a really good floodgate in the form of Empin, it has things like Risa and Apex Avian, things like that, but also Battles of Chaos did give them their brand new quick play. It's called Floowandereeze and the Journey Preparations or something like that. Maybe that was the original name, I don't know. But it is a quick play that allows you to banish one of your winged Flunders or whatever that's in your hand or on field, and you get to search for the map, their field spell, or another one. And basically, not only does this just help their consistency overall, because sometimes they can draw kind of mediocre hands if they don't draw Robin or even Eagle, but also this helps them avoid hand traps. They used to have to Book of Moon their own things to protect them from Effect Veiler, Imperm, that's the other thing, I'm sorry, I'm like speed doing this as fast as I can. But now they can actually not only avoid those, but also get advantage off of it. Even cooler is it helps get around things like skill drain as well, because you can normal summon, activate the effect, activate the the quick play spell, banish it, and now its effect will resolve, which is absolutely amazing. And so for those reasons, I'm actually going to be putting Flunder above Sky Striker in tier 1.5. Alright, now without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into the outro. And with that, that's going to be the end of our tier list. I'll go ahead and sit here for a second so you can kind of get a big view of everything like this. So a few things haven't changed since my last tier list or even my last few tier lists. However, we have had some monumental ones like Prank Kids bumping up. And I feel like this format, outside of the Scythelock and everything being Adventure and DPE, I feel like it's overall really fun just in terms of how viable so many different decks can be. This is one of the bigger tier lists I've done in a while. I totally forgot Cyber Dragon, by the way. I'd be putting it in the Rogue category, but for some reason it just didn't upload the file properly. I'm so sorry, Cyber Dragon players. Hopefully you watch to the end so I won't have to explain to you in the comments section. But there's so many different decks that you can play, even ignoring those engines and annoying packages aside. And so I feel like this format can be really fun, especially for newer returning players. But anyways, yeah, that's gonna have to do it for the tier list. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. If I was missing something other than Cyber Dragon, I'm so sorry about that again. If you feel like something was placed wrong, just remember to be civil about it, by the way, because I have been getting a lot of really obnoxious people just outright saying, no, you're wrong, which is not constructive criticism or good discussion pieces at all. But with that out of the way, that's gonna have to do it for the video. If you liked it, please sure to leave a like on us, helps put this video and the channel into the YouTube recommended. And if you like this content, you want to see more like it, like the rest of my tier list, my deck profiles, again, I do have that Tri-Brigade Bird Up deck list. It's going to be really cool if you would check that out for me, or just other awesome Yu-Gi-Oh content like this. Perhaps consider subscribing, because we're on our way to 1,000 subscribers by May. We're actually on our track of hitting it by the end of March, which I think is crazy. We're at like a 911 or 912 subscribers as of making this video, and so that is crazy for me. And so if you could just help me push towards 1,000, that would be awesome. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.